Then I had to drive, and I was driving there, and I remember the whole drive. It was freezing cold. It was Christmas night, and I just literally just got chills right now talking about it. I just remember just like, I can't even believe this is happening. Just shock. I was by myself, and I'm just the whole time thinking, he's got to be okay, and praying that he's going to be fine when I get there. And so, that is like the immediate impact. Welcome to Aging in Style with Lori Williams, the podcast all about finding the silver lining no matter what life throws your way. I'm Lori Williams, an award-winning senior living expert, author, educator, and caregiver to my husband, Mark. Join me as I share insights, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate the world of senior housing, discover ways to pay for care, advocate for your loved ones, and most importantly, learn how to thrive, not just survive, as you age. Hi, welcome to Aging in Style. If you have been following along through the month of May, we have focused on strokes because it's Stroke Awareness Month. And if you listen to the podcast, you know I have a personal experience on a journey with stroke recovery. My husband's a 4-time stroke survivor. So it's really means a lot to me to talk about strokes, to talk about how people can prevent them. And if you've had a stroke, be there to be able to provide you with things that you can do, kind of a path, if you will, to figure your way through a very trying and difficult time. So what I'm going to talk about today is what is the emotional impact on a family when a family member suffers a stroke. And this could also be for anyone with a progressive disease like dementia, Parkinson's, MS, anything like that. But it's affected a person. The person in the family has become ill. But what the ripple effects of it, how it affects everyone else in the family, because it does. So, as many of you know, if you followed our journey, that my husband had the 4 strokes Christmas Day 2022. He is severely disabled, so he cannot be left at home alone. And just kind of give you the brief synopsis here, but we have caregivers that help out. Our son helps out. He's 29. Our daughter, when he's home, we have a whole host of therapists, but things are constantly changing, constantly in flux. And, I work full time and just trying to keep all the balls in the air. And I mean, it's a lot. It is a lot. So let's first talk about the short-term effects. So short-term meaning like the immediate impact, like what happened. So, and the feelings that you have. And I did write a book where I talk a lot about this. The book is called Surrounded by Love, and you can find it on Amazon or on my website, and it was published last July. I wrote the book because as I was recording on notes, just typing on notes on my iPhone, just through the entire experience, like how I was feeling. And I wasn't necessarily doing that to write a book, but it was just kind of like I was by myself watching all this horrific thing happen to my husband. And I just was typing everything that I felt at the time. So the good thing about that is I can, I remember what happened because I typed all this stuff. But in the immediate, when something happens, say if it's something sudden, like a stroke or a car accident or something that's pretty sudden, or even, just getting the diagnosis of dementia or Parkinson's or ALS or whatever it may be, I think we would all go through these same, I'm going to say like 4 different feelings. So one is just emotional, complete shock and disbelief. So it's a dementia diagnosis, but in my case, when Mark had his stroke, my first reaction, of course, was to get him medical attention immediately. But as things just kept progressing, and one minute we think he's going to be fine, it was 1 stroke, and then the next minute we've got 3 more strokes on top of this. It was just complete shock and disbelief that I just could not even believe that this was happening. A lot of times people would have that feeling of shock. Also, like maybe they've called 911, they're waiting for the paramedics to get there. I think for me, it was sort of delayed because I drove Mark to the hospital, which I've said before, don't do that, call 911. But I drove him because it was right around the corner. But I do remember that shock and disbelief really hitting me as he had to be care flighted by helicopter. I know they call it something different in other states, but it's care flight here in Texas. They sent him to another city, to another hospital. And then I had to drive, and I was driving there, and I remember the whole drive. It was freezing cold. It was Christmas night, and I just literally just got chills right now talking about it. I just remember just like, I can't even believe this is happening. Just shock. I was by myself, and I'm just the whole time thinking, he's got to be okay, and praying that he's going to be fine when I get there. And so, that is like the immediate impact, as I said, is just that shock and disbelief. 2 is crisis mode and hypervigilance. And I felt this more when Mark came home. So in our situation, Mark went from hospital to hospital, then to rehabs, and he actually did not come home until like 7 months later, which is crazy. But I remember this and still have these kind of hyper vigilant modes, constant fear of him having a fall. And I didn't realize how much that stayed with me, that I was so afraid he would fall, until he actually had a fall in March. And he had been home for over 2 years. And so he had a fall. Finally, that was just kind of like the worst case scenario in my mind. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, if he falls, oh my gosh, that's going to be it. What am I going to do? And I think I kind of built it up in my mind to be something much worse. And it could have been much worse, but his fall luckily was kind of a controlled slide. But we couldn't get him up. And so we had to call 911. But after that, I think a lot of the fear of him falling has gone away. For us also, a year after his strokes, he had a just massive seizure, and was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was worse than the stroke, because my son and I thought he was dead. And just waiting for the ambulance to get there, it just felt like forever. And so we held on to a lot of stress after that. I would say probably my son and I both did, having witnessed that. And just kind of like, will he have another seizure or won't he? And then the day came where he had another seizure, and it was me with him, and no phone to call 911. I had him in the bathroom and, screaming. I remember just trying to get this scream out to my son, because it was early in the morning, and I needed him to call 911 because I was holding Mark in his wheelchair while he had this seizure. And, my son heard me, thank God, came down. My daughter happened to be there. They came down. We called 911, but I remember my son being so shook up, like he called 911, he couldn't talk. And so I just had to take the phone and tell them our address, and they came and took him. And after that, they put him on seizure meds. Thank you. But I don't think we have the same fear that we did. So now I will tell you, I carry my phone all the time. It's very rare that I'm without my phone, because I don't ever want to be in that situation where I need to call 911 and I need to hold him so he's not hurt and have to go look for my phone. So that it gives me some peace of mind that I always have my phone with me. So that's kind of like what I'm saying. You're like in this crisis mode, and then you become hyper vigilant for certain things that could happen. And when you become hyper vigilant like that, it does mess with your sleep. It messes, and you're always stressed because you're always on alert. So your body is always in that, fight or flight mode, which is not healthy. And I know you may be checking for signs all the time, like, oh, he looks kind of funny. Is he about to have another seizure? Or for me, and I still do this, I look at him because I witnessed all of his strokes, and sometimes I'll look at him and I'm like, gosh, is his mouth drooping a little bit? And it's easy to get yourself really like worked up and scared all the time. And you have to, I don't even know how to tell you that, but you have to find some peace in it. And I think this would be the same way with like if someone has dementia and, maybe one day they seem much worse, or they say something and you're just kind of freezing your tracks like, oh my gosh, are we at the next level of dementia? Or, same thing with Parkinson's or ALS or whatever it may be. You're just always kind of waiting for that next shoe to drop. The third way that this is, any kind of an illness or, catastrophic event can cause, like in the short term. And I mean, these are short term, but I'm going to say living this, some of it is actually long term. It's, role reversal and just a loss of like your normal life that you always had. Children becoming caregivers to parents. And our situation, our son has become an incredible caregiver to his dad. He does the showering because he's better at it than I am. I think with anything like this, unfortunately, the spouse usually like takes the brunt of the, if the person's angry, unhappy, whatever, it kind of takes the brunt of it. And I think also, I've said this before on other podcasts, I think as women, a lot of times we take things personally. So when my husband is angry, he's very hard to understand. So when it's hard for him to explain something and I'm not getting it, he gets angry, he starts to yell. I take that personally. It just spirals. It's not a pretty thing. And it makes me feel terrible. So my son, or our son, he just doesn't take things personally because he's a guy. Two, he's on the autism spectrum. And so he's just, which is a good thing because he's just kind of like, well, yeah, dad yelled, whatever. He doesn't let it affect him in a way that it affects me. So, but it makes me sad that he has, as much as proud as I am of him and how incredible he's been, stepping into that role of caregiver, it makes me sad that he has to take care of his dad. We don't expect that, but it does happen, and it's going to happen for more and more of us. Typically, as our parents age, there's so many people I talk to who their parents are in their 80s, 90s, even hundreds, and they are the caregiver for their parents. So it's part of it. The other thing, kind of role reversal and loss of just your normal life, is spouse shifting into the caretaker mode instead of you're not really the partner mode anymore. And it changes your marriage. It changes your relationship and your dynamic when you are taking care of someone and they're not exactly who they used to be. It kind of switches where you don't necessarily see them as a spouse. You see them more as, I hate to say it, but kind of like a child, someone you're like one of your children that you're caring for. And like I would do anything on earth for my kids. I would do anything on earth for Mark too, to make sure that he is safe and cared for. Number 4 is, when you're going through all of this stress, there can be communication breakdowns. So, different family members react differently. And in my case, I'm going to say my kids probably reacted a little differently, and that Chris, being older and being a boy, he really stepped into being of help to me and helping his dad. Abby has been a help to us, but was 19 when this happened, and she's in college. And I think she just kind of, especially initially, just really, which was good. I was happy for her, just kind of stayed with her friends and tried to have a normal college life, which I wanted her to do. I mean, what could she do? Sit there in the hospital or sit at the rehab? No, that's not a thing to do. But I would say she probably was more like avoiding the whole thing. She's also more sensitive. I would say it took a toll on her in that she's always had some anxiety. It has intensified that anxiety that she has. But, in any family, people just react differently. Some may be in denial. I'm thinking like if this was a family where maybe mom has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you may have one child who says no, and they're in denial. Oh, it's just normal. She's getting older. She's forgetting things. Then you may have someone who's, the avoider. and the way that they're dealing with it is that they're just avoiding everything. They don't want to talk about it. They're just kind of not available. And then you may have the over-controlling behavior, the one who's trying to take over and take charge of everything. For myself, of course, I, as the wife, and we have no one else. Mark has no other family here. He has a brother, but he lives in California. So there was no one other than me to be the one in control of everything. So maybe I got the over-controlling behavior or just, I had to be in control. Also, like with communication breakdowns, sometimes not in our situation, but if, say, families I've worked with where one parent has been diagnosed with dementia, siblings disagree about what the next steps are and like maybe level of care that may be needed for their family member. So you may have some that, where it's a brother and sister and the brother's like, she's going to stay home and we'll just bring a caregiver in. And the sister saying, no, she needs to go to memory care. So that happens because everyone's different. The second part I want to speak about, so that's sort of like, as I said, the immediate impact, the short-term effects, but there are ongoing strain, I guess we would call it, and just long-term psychological effects that come with being the caregiver for a loved one. So some of the things that can happen, chronic anxiety and PTSD-like symptoms. I think I had some PTSD. I think I still am dealing with a little bit of it. And that was really triggered by not necessarily the strokes, although, that was not good, obviously, but the seizure that he had was just the most terrifying thing I've been through. So it's kind of when you have sort of this chronic anxiety going on, it's like every sound or unusual behavior can kind of trigger you. Like I mentioned earlier, I had this whole fear of him falling. Well, now I don't so much have that fear because it's happened and I saw we got through it. Everything worked out. Choking, I have that fear sometimes for him. If I hear him coughing and it sounds funny, I'll come running from wherever I am in the house and like, are you okay? And I'm sure it drives him crazy because he'll look at me like, yeah, I'm just coughed. Why are you freaking out? And so that kind of thing can create sort of a constant tension. Second way that, it can affect psychologically would be depression and grief. And I am not someone, and I'm just speaking in my truth and who I am, is that I'm thankfully not someone who's been prone to depression. And I'm like very thankful for that. But I have had moments where, I kind of dipped my toe into depression and maybe had a day or two where I was really down and just, it was hard to pull yourself up out of it and be like, okay, you got to get it together. You got to get to work. You got to get this done. And I've had a little bit of anxiety. And, I think if you do begin to suffer with these types of things, I think absolutely go to your doctor. I do have a medication I take when I feel very anxious, and I try not to take it every day and try to control the anxiety. And when depression kind of creeps in, I am trying to control it in other ways, like with exercise, with friends, with meditation, with different things like that, because I really prefer that than, to be on medication. That's just me though. But I do have a prescription. So I'm just saying, you do what's right for you. So also there's grief. And I've had people say, you can't grieve someone who's still alive. Yeah, you can. You can 100% grieve someone who is still alive. You're grieving the before version of that person. And I wrote this in the book because this has always stayed with me. Like the things that I miss about Mark is I miss the way he walked. And he walked with like such purpose and just, you could hear he just had a distinct way of walking. And I never thought about it until he wasn't able to walk in that manner any longer. The other thing, I miss his voice. And my daughter and I recently were going through her phone and she saves, I had no idea, she saved like every voicemail that Mark and I have left for her. And she was playing messages that he left. And I have forgotten in 2.5 years what his voice truly sounded like. And to hear him talking, and I forgot he had like a pretty serious Texas twang. And I kind of forgot about that, just not having heard his voice in 2.5 years. I hear his voice, but he can say words every now and then. And it's not a lot of, it's like repetition, like two, something, things like that. And it's not his normal voice. He doesn't sound like himself anymore. He sounds like himself, but it's not, you're not hearing him talk in complete sentences and speak to you like he normally would have. It was lovely to hear, but it was also sad and a reminder that he's not how he was before the strokes. I think the other thing that can bring on feelings of like depression or grief, it's, if you allow yourself to become isolated from social activities or having your previous life routine. And that happens to a lot of people because they don't have a caregiver to help them. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe none of the kids are able to step up. I don't want to say can, but maybe they're not able. Maybe they're working, they have their own families. And I'm thankful that I am in a position where I have Chris, my son, has been amazing. Although I tell him all the time, I don't want to take away from your life. I want you to go out and live your life. I don't want your life to be caring for your dad because I don't know what this is going to look like, how long this is going to be. But, he has told me over and over, I like taking care of my dad. I want to take care of my dad. And so he does. And I'm thankful for that. I am the type of person I think would be extremely depressed if I had to sit in a house all day long. I am very social. I get out of the house every day. I can't sit in the house. I like to be busy. I like to be doing things. And also in our situation, I have to continue working. And we were not in a position where I could just retire. I mean, I was 58 when he had his strokes. And also, I love what I do. Absolutely love it. I would be so sad if I had to give up what I love doing. I think also I have moments of kind of like these little twinges. Like when we had always talked about, when the kids are older, and they're grown, we're going to go travel. We're going to go see all these things. Mark his dream was an RV and just travel around, drive around, take a month and, go see the U.S. Mine was to travel, go to Ireland, England, Italy. I mean, all these places. I've never been to Europe. That was my goal. So it's kind of hard now seeing, and I'm happy for people. So I don't want to sound like I'm not happy for them, but, people post on Facebook. They're on these like fantastic, fabulous vacations. And there's this little twinge in me, like, that will never be Mark and I, Maybe one day I'll get to do those, but then that makes me feel sad to kind of think doing it without him. But it is what it is. And that's in no way will we be traveling to Italy or Greece and doing all these fantastic excursions and things. So it does give you those twinges of sadness and, I'm not going to lie, a little bit of jealousy. Like, why did our life turn out like this? Why didn't we get to be the ones going on these great adventures like we wanted to? But you know what? I really do try to snap myself out of it because there are so many wonderful things that have come from this. I'm just like that. I like to try to find positive out of a negative situation. But there are good things that have come from this. And I'm not going to allow myself to sit and wallow that I am not able to go on a vacation to Italy. And I also just want to put in perspective, I am well aware that, again, we are blessed that we're able to stay in our house. I have care. I have all these things. And I know a lot of people can't afford that or don't have someone like my son who's willing to be a caregiver. The other thing kind of, I think, falls under that kind of ongoing strain and under depression and grief is also the caregiver guilt and sadness. And I think all of us, I don't think there's a caregiver out there that doesn't have moments of guilt. And like when I'm out having, a nice lunch with someone, and sometimes I feel bad that Mark's not a part of it. Or sometimes I get home, like last night's a good example. He was trying to tell me something and I really was trying so hard to understand. I couldn't understand. I had worked till 7. I was starving. And I'm just like, okay, I will get back to this later. I want to go eat something. And he raised his voice and got upset. And, I said, please don't yell at me, and left the room. And, it just, nobody feels good in that situation because I'm feeling bad because now I don't understand him and it's stressing me out because he's stressing out. And then I just want to exit the situation. I just don't want to I'm too tired. I'm starving. I don't want to be a part of this. And I just want to get out of the situation. And then, he's yelling. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, what the hell? And that's just being like straight out honest with y'all. That is what it feels like being a caregiver. But then afterwards, then I feel guilt because then I'm like, he has a brain injury. He's trying to tell me something. He's so frustrated. And you have to just give yourself grace. That's what I'm going to say. Give yourself grace because I say that to myself all the time. I'm doing the very best I can. And Mark is very well cared for. But there will always be moments where I have guilt and that I have sadness. And that's just part of it. I think also you have to really watch for burnout and compassion fatigue, mental, emotion, and physical exhaustion. If you're not getting sleep, proper rest, or some time to yourself, you will burn out. So you have to find a way to get someone to help you. And I know in some cases that's impossible, but you just have to. That is all part of how being a caregiver is going to takes that emotional impact on you and your family. Also feeling like there's absolutely no end in sight. This is going to be my life forever. And I have those moments too. Like I said, I want to go to Italy one day. Well, that's too far for me to go, and not be here for Mark. And I can't leave that on my kids. If something were to happen, I would never forgive myself. So that is just out of the question for me. And the impact on relationships. There can be marital strain. So say you are trying to care for your mother and, that could put a strain on your own marriage. As we said earlier, siblings or extended family kind of withdrawing or arguing, feeling people are making the wrong decision. Children, if there's younger children, feeling neglected or just scared. They don't know what's going on, whether it's, something's happened to a parent. And my daughter, I wouldn't consider her like a younger child. Obviously, she was 19 when this happened. And I don't think she felt neglected because I was calling her and trying to comfort her. But I know she felt very scared through a lot of this and very anxious. But I can only imagine like younger children being very confused if suddenly mom is gone because she's taking care of grandma and grandpa and she doesn't know what's happening there. So I think the big thing is finding coping mechanisms and trying to move forward with everything. And so some of the coping mechanisms that I have found that are helpful, you could always do therapy or support groups. I went to therapy once and I got to say it wasn't really for me. I didn't get a whole lot out of it and it was very expensive and my insurance didn't cover it. So it actually cost me a little more stress. So I'm like, I think I'm good. But I have a great support group of friends and I have some really close friends who I can say anything at all to. And, and I do. And they feel free to tell me things like, you got to get it together, Lori, or, it's time to hire a caregiver or whatever it may be. So I think that's really important to have those people in your life. And there's also support groups of other people who may be going through what you're going through. So like dementia support groups. And there's some great ones for that. You can get some ideas and tips and learn things that may help you in caring for your loved one. I think also just educating and being prepared, like knowing, like for me, once Mark had a stroke, it was just like, game on. I'm going to find out everything about strokes, everything, how to prevent them, how to know when one's coming, know the symptoms, know all the things. And I'm going to share that with other people. And I just feel like that kind of gave me a little more empowered feeling. And also the feeling that I'm taking something that really sucks and hopefully paying it forward, helping someone else avoid going through what we've gone through. I think also it's very, very helpful to have an emergency plan. And we have a emergency plan that has worked beautifully in March when Mark fell and we had to call 911. So our plan is we have a medication list. It's printed out. It's on the refrigerator. It has Mark's full name, his date of birth, his allergies, which hospital we want him to go to, because that's very crucial for him because we can't go to the hospital that's closest, which is the one that does not do strokes. So we had to go to one that is a little further, not far, but a little further out. So that's on there. We have a grab bag now of everything. So I've kind of learned from being in emergency rooms and the waiting rooms, you're always cold, or I am at least always freezing. So a blanket is a necessity, water, bottled water, snacks. So these are the things that, are so important. Your charger for your phone. So I now have a bag ready to go. I don't have a charger in it, so I just remember to grab my charger. But those are the things you need because it's tough. The last time we sat in a emergency room, it was for 15 hours. Before he could be admitted till a room was ready. 15 hours in a hardback chair. And we got there at 1 a.m. So it was not a good night, I can assure you. I think also take any of your medications. I forgot to add that. So if you're going to be going with someone that you're the caregiver for and you have medications that you take, be sure to throw your medications in there because you don't know how long you're going to be stuck before you can leave. Also, I think it's really important having your plan, what I call your ABC plan, we all want our loved one to stay home until the very end. We don't want to have to make a decision, about moving them somewhere. But, reality is, if Mark gets to the point where he's falling a lot and I can't pick him up off the ground because he's a lot bigger than me, when someone falls and you try to get them off the ground, it is like dead weight. And dead weight is, you can't budge him. It took 4 firemen to pick Mark up in his, when he fell in March. So you have to have a plan in place. Some people can afford 24/7 caregivers. It's very, very, very expensive. I can't afford that. And I know it. So I have a plan for Mark. I know when that time comes, and I hope it never does, but I know where I would move him, and I know that he would have good care there. All right. I always tell everyone who I talk to, because my business is senior placement, and of course, everyone wants to stay home. That's their main goal, which I totally get, and that's how we are too. We want Mark to stay home forever. We don't want him to ever have to move. But it's very important that you have a plan in place, and I tell everyone this. You need to have a plan. Plan A. Caregivers, you need some backup. If you don't have a caregiver right now, you need to have caregiver as a backup. You can't do everything on your own. You will burn out. 2, you need to figure out where your loved one will go if the time comes that you can no longer care for them. I hope I will always be able to care for Mark at home. But reality is, if he gets to the point where he's falling and I can't pick him up and it's an unsafe environment, then we will have to move him. And I do have that place picked out as well. I know where I would move him. So for me, as much as it's a scary thing to have to think about, it gave me peace to know what the plan is. I have conveyed that plan to my son and to my daughter, so they know this is what will happen. Everyone's on board. We hope it doesn't, but we have a plan. And I also kind of in closing want to say, I think it's really important, when we think about caregiving and we're talking about someone being ill and, all the different feelings that are negative feelings, that are difficult feelings that we're having, I think we also need to take a moment to honor joyful moments, because there are still joyful moments that happen and funny things that happen that maybe only we find funny because we're in this crazy situation. But we have to really focus on those and not lose sight, not lose our joy. And for me, I can't imagine being in a place where I would be so unhappy that I wouldn't find something to laugh about or something silly, something at least once in the day. I just can't imagine it. So I feel like we need to, instead of just focusing on what our loved one can no longer do, let's focus on what they can do. And I've really tried to celebrate Mark because he has been such a warrior through this. And, he had a PT who was fantastic, and sometimes you connect differently with certain people, and he really connected with her. And she was able to get him doing things that he had not done since he had the stroke. He walked up the stairs with her help. Just things like that were crazy 2.5 years after a stroke. So I have video of him doing it. I have him being silly with her. I have him going on a walk in our neighborhood, which he had not done in 2.5 years. So they sound like such little small accomplishments, but no, these are huge accomplishments. And so I shared them with everyone, and I celebrated Mark and told him how proud I was of him, because these are very, very difficult things to do. And so it's so important to honor and focus on what your loved one is still able to do. It's all about celebrating the small wins and being in the present. Even with someone with dementia, my grandmother had dementia, but we still had funny memories, things that happened that we all still laughed. And one thing, my grandmother was a woman who had a pretty difficult life, and she really didn't care much for men because she'd had, just some difficult situations. And she was telling us that she was going on a date. She was going out dancing and, things like that. You have to laugh and you're just kind of like, wait, what? What is happening here? But it is funny. And so I just feel that we have to find joy and humor in whatever moments that we can. So I think those are the things that can keep you healthy, emotionally healthy through this kind of an experience. So I just want to close with, encouraging other families out there that you're not alone and there's other people. We see you, we feel you, the caregiver guilt, the screaming in a garage. Yeah, we see you. We do it. And I had that conversation yesterday with a precious lady who she said, well, I scream in my car. And I said, there's nothing wrong with it. I scream in my garage. And, we're doing what we can do to survive and to stay healthy. But if you feel that you're, so low and so depressed and getting to that point, you really need to seek help with a therapist, doctor. Maybe it's time to go on medication. There's no shame in that. Like I said, I take a happy pill when I have to. So I think it's also really important to connect with resources. If your loved one has dementia, there are dementia support groups that may be great help to you. There's the Alzheimer's organization, it's alz.org, alz.org. And of course, as the focus this month has been on strokes, there are many, many resources for strokes. And, you can find a lot of my podcast on aging in style. A lot of episodes have been about stroke and on this journey. So if you are on a similar journey, please go back and listen to all those. We'll also put them in the show notes where you can get in there and see which ones might be of benefit to you. And I appreciate you listening and thank you for hanging out with me all through May to talk about stroke awareness. And please share with your friends and family. Follow us on social media. And thank you, as always, for listening to the podcast. Please share it with your friends, family, whoever. You never know who may be walking the same path and need resources and help. And that's what we're here for. So please share, please go on and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. We have a new episode every Friday. So thanks again for listening and tune in next week. Bye-bye. Hi, thank you for listening. Navigating care for a loved one who's a stroke survivor can be totally overwhelming. Yes, the internet is free and there's a ton of information out there, but also your time is valuable. That's why I wrote my book, Surrounded by Love, One Family's Journey Through Stroke Recovery. In the book, I document everything that I've learned and wish someone had told me about while I was navigating the first months of stroke recovery with my husband, Mark. It's available now on Amazon and all other online book retailers. There's also a link in the show notes that you can click to get your own copy.